Welcome to Radical Personal Finance. My name is Joshua Sheets. I'm your host. Today on the podcast, I would like to share with you some ideas about the true cost of having children. Why might you be interested in this topic? Well, I have 6 of them myself, and I am feeling the costs of having children. Now, you might be surprised that I am not here referring to the stories that we get just about every year, wherein we find out the official government calculations of exactly how much it costs to have children. I looked those up in preparation for the show. Here is a CBS News article from April 2026. Headline: Raising a child now costs over $300,000 in the United States. Study finds. See how your state compares. A new estimate from LendingTree puts the price tag at $303,418 for 2026, or an average of $16,857 per year. It's the first time the figure topped $300,000 since LendingTree began the analysis in 2023 and is up from about 2% from a year earlier. So, of course, these are just studies that companies make in order to be able to release a press release. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, who knows. The U.S. Department of Agriculture keeps track of some of these numbers, and they have estimated that the cost of raising a children is also a couple $100,000. The latest article I see on this, well, one of the latest in 2017 on the USDA website, we see that the cost of raising a child is $233,000. And we see those about every year. And frankly, I think a lot of this is just antenatal propaganda. I don't know if it's true, if it's not true, but I think a lot of it is antenatal propaganda. I don't like it. I don't like to share it for that reason. However, honesty does require that we discuss the costs of having children. And I think that when we discuss numbers like these, there are a couple of responses that people tend to give. The first response is, oh, well, that's really, really expensive. I don't want any children, or I don't want any more children. And I think that is, for many people, hopefully for most people, that is the wrong response. I think you're giving in to just antenatal propaganda, and that these basic numbers are in many cases fake. And I don't think that even if you avoid the expenses of children, I don't think that you get off scot-free. I will talk at the end of the podcast about the costs of not having children. The other thing that I often hear is people will read these studies or hear these numbers, and they will say, that's ridiculous. I don't spend anywhere near that amount of money raising children. After all, if it costs, $17,000 or $18,000 a year, and I've got, let's just say it's $20,000 a year, and I've got 5 children, I'm not spending $100,000 a year on my children. After all, I'm only making $75,000. And that is also true, but also false. And I think the way we reconcile that is simply just to recognize that children will basically cost you about as much money as you have. I've observed myself in several situations over the last couple of weeks just falling prey to that exact truth, that my children cost me exactly as much money as I have. I was doing some things for them. I'll tell you the story. One of my children is traveling outside the country, and over the last months, I have gotten my older children Apple Watches. And I was testing this, right? I'm caught on the horns of a dilemma when it comes to electronic devices, as we all are. On the one hand, I believe that electronic devices and electronic connectivity is incredibly valuable. My portal to the world through my phone allows me to make money, record podcasts. It's enormously helpful. It's enormously valuable. It's a wonderful tool, and I'm really glad to have it. However, that same screen is also a source of never-ending potential brain rot, and it takes a huge amount of discipline for me to control myself and not have that thing be absolutely negative in my life. And frankly, I don't even have the discipline to do it. And so I've had to use and lean on strategies like just not even having the phone with me. And one of the strategies that for me has been really, really effective has been to have a cellular-enabled Apple Watch as my primary communication tool. So that way I can just leave the phone behind completely. The phone is a work device. It has all my work stuff on it, so I can always have it when I know I need to work. But if I want to go to the park and I want to play with my children, or if I'm going to go out and be social, I don't need to have the phone. I can leave the phone behind, and that way I'm not burying my face in a screen. I'm not rotting my brain. I'm keeping my attention span sharp. And so that physical division is really valuable for me. And as I look at children and teenagers, I think we have the same exact problem. On the one hand, the device can be an incredibly powerful tool of social connection, But on the other hand, it also has a pretty good chance of being the most destructive thing in their lives by eliminating their ability to do deep and meaningful work, by encouraging brain rot, and by opening them up to a whole world of social negativity. And so here I'm referring to Jonathan Haidt's, what was the name of that book? Anxious Generation, and just thinking about kind of some of his research and what he has learned and taught with that process. So I believe that one potential pathway through this is the use of something like a cellular enabled smartwatch, like an Apple Watch, because an Apple Watch is a great tool for connectivity. It allows you to call, it allows you to text, it allows you to experience necessary messages. You can do some useful functions like take notes, get directions, etc. But it doesn't open you up so automatically to all of the attention span destroying distractions that come with a phone. And so I think that this is a really good on-ramp for for young people, and it's really good for me as an adult, and I think it's a really good on-ramp for young people into the world of having and using these devices. So that's the backstory of my Apple Watch saga. Well, recently, so I've had good experience with that, but I have been frustrated with setting up Apple Watches for international travel. The problem is that I have previously, being a frugal guy, I have set up Apple Watch plans as a family shared watch under my parental phone, my parental screen. And that strategy, I think, is a really good one until you get to international travel. And there is no way that I've been able to discover using an American cell phone carrier to make those watches work as they should for international travel. So recently I was spending some time reworking this, going through adding phone plans, which, by the way, I find it ridiculous as a financial advisor that in order to get better results, we pay more to get fewer features. So what I mean is the solution. This is crazy, and yet I do think it's the right answer. We could do everything on a phone, right? We could read on a reading app on a phone. We could watch videos on a phone. We could listen to things on a phone. We could communicate on a phone. And so the phone is the omni tool. The problem is that because the phone is the omni tool, we basically are always shunted into the lowest return, lowest benefit activities on the phone. So yes, I could read on the Kindle app on my phone, but when I'm on the Kindle app on my phone, I can't focus because I know that a TikTok feed is just right there, and I'll get way more of a dopamine hit from the TikTok feed, and so I don't read very much. Or I know that YouTube is right there, and I'll get way more of a hit. It's much easier for me to sit and watch endless videos than it is to read this difficult text that I am reading. And so what I have to do in order to make my brain work well is I have to multiply the devices. I think the best tool here is to work with a digital e-reader, like an actual Kindle device, separate, and to put YouTube onto something like a smart TV where you're less likely to do the endless scroll. That way you can get the benefit of watching the YouTube videos, you can get the benefit of doing the reading on the ebook, but it's just not all on one device. But now we've just multiplied the cost. Now I just took what I can do on one device and I purchased 3 of them. Same thing with a watch. We're adding this in. And now the silly application is that I've had to add in multiple new phone plans to my family in order to make the international travel work. Your Apple Watch will work during international travel on a cellular connection if it is paired with a separate cell phone line to a cell phone that has its own line. And so I'm paying multiple more phone bills that don't have to be paid in order to minimize brain rot. So forgive the ridiculous kind of side frame, but that's where I was. The problem was that this thing didn't go very well, is that I was working on this transfer over. And this transfer over had a variety of technical problems, and I spent more than 10 hours on the phone with tech support with the phone company, sitting in the phone store while the technician in the phone store worked on solving the problem. While the technician in the phone store called the tech support, I was assured that there was a solution. Then I came back, it still didn't work. It was the most obscene use of time I have engaged in quite a while, but I was trying to solve it before my child's international trip without me. And so in this process, I was counting the cost of how much time it was taking from me. Again, it took more than 10 hours of my time physically in stores, about 7 or 8 hours in stores, in the Apple store, in the cell phone store, in addition to a few more hours on the phone with tech support, and the amount of money that it was costing me with multiple new devices to solve this problem. This is the most absurd and true to life example of children will cost you the amount of money that you have. Is that if I didn't have the money, there's not a chance in the world I would be doing what I was doing. After all, people don't need cell phones at all. People certainly don't need sell watches, don't need smart watches. None of that is necessary. We've done just fine without them for a long time. And if I didn't have the money, I wouldn't have spent it. But because I like the technology, I find it useful. Of course, I can justify it in various ways. And then I can go and I can spend it. But I've spent an absurd amount of money that I wouldn't otherwise need. And as I was sitting there counting my life, I was reflecting on the fact that I have basically become a full-time tech support. Like, I'm an IT specialist for my family. If you have 6 children, then in the fullness of time, you will find yourself in a position where you're probably running about 8 phones, and then possibly 8, under my scenario, possibly 8 smartwatches, 8 computers, 8 Kindles. Like, what an absurd and absolutely ridiculous thing. And the amount of time that I spend going through and setting up parental controls and establishing this profile and doing that. I mean, you don't know what the most absurd thing is that Apple does not allow you to have more than 4 children profiles under an Apple family. So I have 6 children, and there's no way for me to build a family size of more than 6. Well, I'm a family of 8. So I can't even use the Apple's built-in family things because they discriminate against large families. So welcome to the ridiculousness of my life. My point is that that's just an example of how things cost basically what you allow them to cost. None of that is necessary, but I'm spending money because I can. And the same thing happens in so many aspects of raising children. So your children will cost you about as much money as you have. That's the basic point. So if you have a lot of money, you're going to spend $300,000 a year. If you have a lot of money, then you're going to spend $300,000 from birth to 18. If you have a lot of money, you're going to spend $800,000 from birth to 18. If you have no money, you're going to spend $23,000 from birth to 18. That's how those numbers work out. Because if you have children, they're important to you and you're going to spend money on them. But my point is that the cost is actually much greater than that. Because the true cost of having children has to do with the opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is the fundamental economic concept. If you can master the skill of assessing the opportunity cost of any particular decision, you can master everything related to economics. Opportunity cost is what you give up when you make an alternate decision. So in my decision, my choice to spend more than 10 hours working on family tech problems, what did I give up? What did that cost me? Well, if my hourly rate is $500 an hour, the cost of the 10 hours was not the money spent in the store, it was the $5,000 of foregone income. If the thing I gave up was spending time with my children, which it really was, then what I gave up was 10 hours with them and the benefits of that. So if you can master the concept of opportunity cost, it will serve you well in every aspect of your life. When you home in on the opportunity costs of children, I believe what you will find is that the opportunity cost of children is real. And that's definitely what I'm experiencing. I have been one to poo poo the idea that children are expensive for a long time because I've been quite confident that children will cost you whatever you have. But what I do acknowledge is that having children will keep you from being able to execute on other opportunities that you otherwise would be able to do. For example, I travel very little at the moment, and a lot of times there's an opportunity, there's something where there's a conference or a meeting or an event or someone I'd like to go and meet. And every time I do that, I have to sit down and I have to calculate the direct costs of the trip, the flight, the accommodations, the entrance ticket, etc. But usually those are the small costs. The bigger cost is if I'm going to be gone for 4 days. I just think of all the work my wife has to do without my being there. And I just think about the cost of my family, of them having to do that. And that cost is so significant that in many cases I will say no to the travel. Or what about being able to execute on ideas? I am deep in it right now. I'm behind on some commitments that I've made. I'm doing my best to deliver and finish a lot of things and kind of clear all this reputational debt that I have and be somebody who executes. I'm working on 3 different companies. And over the last couple of weeks, I had a bunch of great new ideas for some really cool companies and some really cool products. And man, these things would be amazing. And of course, I can't execute on any of them. I have to just put them on a list and say, nope, can't do that. But then I have to leave the office and go and hang out with my children and go and play catch in the yard or go and have a water balloon fight or go and spend time at dinner with family dinner. And I want to tell you that those costs are real. And in many cases, it is pretty frustrating. I find it frustrating as a man. I find it frustrating as somebody of reasonably high competence. When I look at other people and what other people are able to accomplish, I think, man, I can do that. They're not any better than I am. They're not smarter than I am. They're not better than I am. They just happen to have more time than I do. And if I had the time, I could beat them. But as it turns out, I don't. And so I want to tell you, if you do not yet have children or if your children are very young, a day will come when you will look back and you will wish you had done more. And I certainly tried when I was in that phase of life to maximize it, to avail myself of the opportunities that were at hand. I did my very best, but what I actually accomplished compared to my actual potential was nothing. I could have done so much more. So recognize that the day will come when you will be torn between, do I go and spend time with these people that I love, which is important to me, or do I go and make money, go and build business, go and solve things, go and fix problems and do things that are important? And you will not regret working hard at that other stage of your life. Those are the opportunity costs of having children, and they are real. I am experiencing them. I promise you, they are real. Now, I do want to address, however, the opportunity cost of not having children. The reality is, I myself, at the moment, am deep in the thick of it. And because it's always easier to see the grass being greener on the other side of the fence, it's easy for me to look at people who don't have children and reflect on their lives and think, man, wouldn't it be just great to not have to deal with this? Wouldn't it be able to be great to be able to work easily 100 hours a week and perform all these things and make all this money and experience all this success and get all these social accolades? Wouldn't that be great? The reality is, while the data is clear that married people with children make more money than unmarried, childless people do, the reality is, I think that's probably not true for you. Meaning that you, as an individual with no children, who's listening to a podcast like this, you'll probably be just fine. You'll probably make plenty of money. You'll probably have a great life. Everything will be simple. You'll have plenty of money to go, do what you want, travel, do whatever you want. But over the years, those benefits will start to ring hollow. And you will find yourself very easily trapped in a system where every decade is kind of like the decade before. Every decade feels like the decade before. And you will look around and you will have, in this example, a very healthy bank account. But without a huge degree of work, you will wind up wishing you had more social capital. You'll wind up wishing you had children and grandchildren. Because while the opportunity cost for me at this stage of my life is that I can't make as much money as I otherwise would be able to, the opportunity cost for you at a different stage of your life is that you are likely to be all alone when you really won't want to be alone. I had a good friend of mine die recently, and as I reflected on his life, he was not antagonistic towards getting married and having children. He just kind of never got around to it during the appropriate phase of life. And he always said, man, if I met the right woman, I'd really like to, but he just never got around to it. And he died recently, had lots of money, had all the toys, everything like that. But in spending time with him over the last decade of his life, it was just so obvious that if he could go back and do it all over again, he would do it all over again. And out of respect, I'm not going to tell some of the catastrophic stories here in this context. But the foolishness and the loneliness that he endured at the end of his life, the simping that he did at the end of his life, the sadness that he endured all alone at the end of his life, made me look, as I do frequently, around my dinner table and feel like the richest man in the world. I would not trade places with him. I would not trade places with him to have his trust fund and his income coming in and all of the stuff set up. I would not trade places with him in an instant. He's endured a very long and lonely last decades of his life. He endured a whole bunch of unmet experiences. And the money, while certainly it assuaged some of the pain, what was the point? To drive around on the same streets that I drive around on with my cheap van with a fancy car versus cheap van. My van is fun. It's loud, it's chaotic, but it's fun. His car was pretty lonely. To go out to dinner every day and have plenty of money to do that, I have the joy of sitting down to dinner every day to have meals that are cooked by my children. And if you also just look at the stages of life, I've had many clients over the years that haven't had children. And again, respect, right? It's not we all live our lives, but what I try to do is I try to share the vicarious experiences so that you can make an informed choice. And one of the things that I warn clients of mine who don't have children with is that you have to work really, really hard to differentiate your life when you are older. When you're younger, when you have children, you wind up in this very natural rhythm of life, right? There's a period in time where you're young, you're single, then there's a period of time when you're young and you're newly married, then there's a period of time when you have young children, there's a period of time when you have older children, then there's a period of time when you're in wedding season and you're marrying your children off, then there's a period of time when you're having grandchildren. And the phase I'm in is usually about a 20-year phase where you have a lot of time commitments and there's a lot of demand on your time and on your attention, but it's about a 20-year phase. And on the other side of it, you have a totally different experience of life. So you just got to keep your chin up when you're going through that demanding 20-year phase. If you don't have that natural cyclical nature, where you're looking forward to the graduation of your children's season and the wedding season of all your children and the grandchildren and the doing all those other things, then your life today is likely to look very much like your life 30 years from now. Or put differently, your life 30 years from now is likely to look pretty much like your life 20 years ago. And so you have to work really hard to artificially introduce some staging effect into your planning so that each decade of your life is meaningfully measurably different. whereas those who go through the more traditional life path don't have that same experience. In conclusion, what I want to tell you is that having children is not free. Yes, we have costs, direct costs associated with it. But the bigger costs are the opportunity costs, the things that you can't do because of your obligations towards your family to fulfill the other goals that you have. It's also not free to not have children, because what you give up in that situation is the benefits of having children, especially towards after they grow and are older. So you trade out total time flexibility and total time freedom for a much diminished experience of social life when you are older. But the costs are real. So if you currently have time, do not neglect doing the right things at each stage of life. And if you have the time and you don't have children, or your children are young and you can pour on the work, friend, pour on the work. Because when you're in my position, you'll be really glad that you did that. Thank you for listening. I'll be back with you soon.